Steam hissed from a worn Tupperware container. While families across America thought they were cooking normal dinners, they were actually serving some of the most shocking food combinations in history. My grandmother kept a recipe box filled with dishes that would make today's food bloggers run screaming. Ham wrapped around bananas, meatballs covered in grape jelly, cheese balls rolled in nuts. Every meal was like a dare. These 30 dinners from the 1970s are so bizarre, your grandparents probably never told you they actually ate them. Let's uncover the wild decade when dinner became the ultimate food experiment. Hamburger helper stroganoff. Picture this. It's 1971, and Betty Crocker just released something that would change American dinners forever. Hamburger helper hit store shelves promising complete meals in a box. Just add ground beef and water, and boom, dinner for 6 people in 15 minutes. It sounds crazy now, but back then, this was revolutionary. The stroganoff flavor was everyone's favorite. Families loved that 1 pound of meat could feed the whole family, while kids went crazy for that creamy, tangy sauce coating every single noodle. What made it so popular? You literally needed zero fresh ingredients. Everything came in the box. Pasta, powdered sauce, seasonings. No vegetables, no dairy, no nothing. Parents who lived through the Great Depression watched their kids choose processed food over homemade cooking. But Hamburger Helper represented the American dream of the 70s. Technology was making life easier, faster, and more convenient than ever before. Why spend hours cooking when you could have dinner ready in minutes? The irony was incredible. These were the same families who once grew their own vegetables and made everything from scratch. Now they were celebrating the fact that dinner could come from a cardboard box. The stroganoff variety promised restaurant flavors without any cooking skills required. Just brown some meat, add powder and water, and suddenly you're serving gourmet European cuisine. By 1972, nearly every American household had tried Hamburger Helper at least once. It became so popular that Betty Crocker launched Tuna Helper and Chicken Helper to keep up with demand. The success proved that convenience beat tradition every single time. Families were willing to trade homemade flavor for 15-minute dinners. What's truly shocking is how this represented a complete shift in American food culture. Families went from spending hours in the kitchen to mixing powder with ground beef and calling it gourmet. The stroganoff sauce, made entirely from artificial flavors and preservatives, somehow convinced millions of people they were eating sophisticated European cuisine. Looking back, Hamburger Helper wasn't just food. It was a symbol of how dramatically American families were changing their relationship with cooking, convenience, and what they considered acceptable dinner. The 70s marked the moment when processed beat homemade, and nobody seemed to mind. Tuna noodle casserole with potato chips. Here's something that will blow your mind. The most popular dinner of the 1970s was basically cat food mixed with chips. Tuna noodle casserole became America's obsession, and families served it proudly at dinner parties. They actually thought this was sophisticated cooking. The recipe was shockingly simple. Canned tuna, canned soup, canned peas, boxed noodles, and crushed potato chips on top. You could make this entire dinner without a single fresh ingredient. Church cookbooks from the 70s called this elegant entertaining. Can you imagine serving this to guests today? But here's the crazy part. People actually loved it. The potato chip topping wasn't just random. It was considered the height of culinary innovation. Families would buy bags of chips specifically to crush them over casseroles. The crunchier, the better. Some families even competed to see who could make the crunchiest topping. Campbell's cream of mushroom soup became the secret weapon. Introduced in 1934, it reached peak popularity in the 70s when families realized they could use it as instant sauce for everything. 1 can of soup could transform any combination of ingredients into what seemed like a complete meal. It was basically glue that held weird food combinations together. The psychological appeal was undeniable. Even people who hated fish somehow loved tuna casserole. Kids who refused vegetables would eat the peas mixed in. It became the perfect food for Catholic families during Lent, when meat was forbidden on Fridays. Suddenly, fish didn't seem so scary when buried under chips and soup. What made this truly shocking was the texture combination. Creamy mushroom soup, tender egg noodles, flaky tuna, sweet peas, and crunchy chips created what food scientists call a texture symphony. Every bite delivered something different, keeping your mouth entertained while your brain tried to process what you were actually eating. Families genuinely believed they were serving elegant, sophisticated dinners. The golden potato chip topping made everything look expensive and restaurant-worthy. Nobody questioned whether crushing snack food over canned fish was actually good cooking. This wasn't just a recipe. It was proof that 70s families had completely redefined what constituted acceptable dinner. Cheese, fondue, everything. Get ready for the most ridiculous dinner trend in American history. In the 1970s, families became obsessed with melting cheese in pots and calling it sophisticated European dining. Fondue parties were everywhere, and people treated them like the height of elegance. It was absolutely insane. The whole trend started at the 1964 New York World's Fair, but it exploded in the 70s thanks to aggressive marketing campaigns. Companies convinced Americans that cooking food at the dinner table was somehow fancy and continental. Families invested hundreds of dollars in fondue sets, special forks, and recipe books. They bought into this completely. Here's what made it completely insane. People would melt cheese with wine, then dip everything imaginable into it. Bread, vegetables, fruit, meat. If it could fit on a fork, it went into the cheese. Dinner parties lasted for hours as guests took turns cooking their own food. Imagine paying money to cook your own dinner. The social aspect became more important than the actual eating. Fondue turned dinner into an interactive experience where everyone gathered around bubbling pots of molten cheese. Hosts felt sophisticated serving authentic Swiss cuisine in their suburban dining rooms. They had no idea how ridiculous they looked, but the reality was often hilarious. Cheese would burn, people would lose food in the pot, and dinner tables became sticky messes. Special fondue etiquette developed. If you dropped your bread in the cheese, you had to kiss the person next to you or buy the next round of drinks. These were actual rules people followed. The equipment was equally ridiculous. Families owned special fondue forks, warming stands, recipe booklets, and even fondue cookbooks. Kitchen stores made fortunes selling these specialized tools that would mostly gather dust after the trend died. Most families used their fondue sets maybe 5 times before shoving them in closets. What's truly shocking is how seriously people took this. Fondue parties required planning, preparation, and significant investment. Yet the end result was just melted cheese with stuff dipped in it. Somehow, this simple concept convinced millions of Americans they were experiencing sophisticated international cuisine. The fondue craze proved that presentation could triumph over substance. Pineapple on everything. Prepare yourself for the weirdest food obsession of the 70s. Families put pineapple on absolutely everything and thought it was exotic gourmet cooking. Thanks to Hawaii becoming more accessible and tiki bar culture exploding, Americans became convinced that tropical fruit made every dish sophisticated. They were so wrong. Pineapple chicken became a weeknight staple. Moms would take ordinary chicken breasts, top them with canned pineapple rings, and suddenly believe they were serving Hawaiian cuisine. The sweet fruit combined with savory meat seemed revolutionary to families who'd never traveled beyond their home states. They acted like they'd discovered fine dining. Sweet and sour pork featured chunks of fresh pineapple mixed with bell peppers in glossy, artificial tasting sauce. Restaurants charged premium prices for these exotic dishes that were basically just regular meat with fruit added. Families felt worldly and adventurous ordering anything with pineapple. They thought they were so sophisticated. Pineapple cheese balls dominated every party. The combination of cream cheese, sharp cheddar, and crushed pineapple created sweet and savory appetizers that disappeared faster than hosts could make them. People genuinely believed this represented sophisticated international entertaining. They had no idea how weird it was. Even pizza joints started experimenting with pineapple toppings, though that trend wouldn't explode until the 80s. The idea of fruit on pizza seemed daring and innovative to families who considered pepperoni exotic just a decade earlier. Their minds were blown by the simplest things. The marketing was brilliant. Pineapple represented everything exotic and vacation-like that Middle America craved during an era of economic uncertainty and social change. Families couldn't afford trips to Hawaii, but they could buy canned pineapple and imagine they were experiencing tropical paradise. It was pure fantasy. What's truly shocking is how completely this transformed American cooking. Traditional recipes got pineapple additions that made no culinary sense. Ham and pineapple, chicken and pineapple, even vegetables and pineapple became standard combinations. People lost their minds over tropical fruit. The pineapple obsession proved that Americans were desperate for anything that seemed exotic and sophisticated, even if it meant putting tropical fruit in completely inappropriate places. Somehow, a simple fruit convinced millions of families they were experiencing international cuisine when they were just eating regular food with pineapple stuck on top. TV dinners for kids. Here's something that will horrify modern parents. In the early 70s, companies started making TV dinners specifically designed for children, and families thought this was excellent parenting. Libbyland dinners hit stores promising complete kid-friendly meals in aluminum trays. Parents bought this garbage and felt good about it. Each dinner came with an entree, two sides, a dessert, and a flavored milk drink. We're talking fish sticks with mac and cheese, hamburgers with baked beans, and fried chicken with spaghetti and meatballs. The combinations made no nutritional sense, but kids absolutely loved them. Why wouldn't they? It was basically candy disguised as dinner. The packaging featured cartoon characters and bright colors that made processed food seem fun and appealing. Children begged their parents to buy these individual meals instead of eating family dinners. The trays made every kid feel special, like they had their own personal restaurant meal. It was brilliant marketing to children. Parents genuinely believed they were being progressive and child-friendly. The convenience factor was enormous. No cooking, no cleanup, just pop it in the oven and serve. Busy families embraced anything that made dinner easier, even if it meant feeding kids completely artificial food. They convinced themselves this was good parenting. The marketing was genius. Companies convinced parents that giving children their own separate meals was somehow better than traditional family dining. Kids got to eat different food than adults, and everyone thought this represented modern, enlightened parenting. They had no idea how crazy this was. What made this truly shocking was the complete abandonment of family meal traditions. Instead of everyone eating the same home-cooked food together, families started serving different processed meals to different family members. The dinner table became a collection of individual TV dinners rather than shared family food. The ingredients were horrifying by today's standards. Artificial colors, preservatives, flavor enhancers, and processed meat products. But 70s, families saw this as space-age convenience food that represented the future of dining. They thought they were living in the future. This trend proved that convenience could completely override nutrition, tradition, and common sense. Families willingly paid premium prices to feed their children artificial food because it seemed modern and easy. Quiche for every occasion. Get ready for the most ridiculous food trend of the 70s. Suddenly, every American family became obsessed with French egg pies and served them at every possible occasion. Quiche went from sophisticated French cuisine to suburban dinner staple practically overnight. It was absolutely everywhere. The classic Lorraine version with bacon and Swiss cheese appeared at brunches, lunches, dinners, and even picnics. Families who'd never heard of French cooking suddenly owned special quiche pans and acted like experts on European cuisine. The trend became so pervasive that by 1982, someone wrote an entire book called Real Men Don't Eat Quiche. That should tell you everything. Here's what made it completely insane. These were the same families eating hamburger helper and TV dinners, but they felt sophisticated serving French egg custard in pastry crust. Hostesses loved how elegant quiche quiche looked on the table, golden custard filling and flaky crust that seemed effortlessly continental. They had no idea what they were doing. The versatility drove people crazy with excitement. Leftover ingredients could be transformed into something that sounded sophisticated and worldly. Ham and cheese became quiche Lorraine. Spinach and cheese became quiche Florentine. Any combination of eggs, cream, and leftovers suddenly had a fancy French name. It was ridiculous. Kitchen stores made fortunes selling quiche pans, recipe books, and specialized serving utensils. Families invested in equipment for making one specific dish that they'd probably never heard of 5 years earlier. The commitment was absolutely ridiculous. These people bought entire kitchen setups for egg pie. But here's the truly shocking part. Most American quiche bore no resemblance to actual French cooking. It was basically scrambled eggs with cream baked in pie crust, but families convinced themselves they were experiencing authentic European cuisine. They were living in complete fantasy. The psychological appeal was enormous. Quiche represented aspirational cooking, French cuisine that suburban Americans could actually master using familiar ingredients. It made ordinary people feel sophisticated and cultured without requiring any real culinary skill. This trend proved that Americans were desperately eager to feel worldly and elegant, even if it meant obsessing over egg custard in pastry crust. Somehow, French breakfast food became the ultimate symbol of sophisticated American entertaining. 7-layer gelatin salad. Prepare yourself for the most ridiculous salad in American history. Families spent hours creating rainbow gelatin towers and proudly served them as sophisticated side dishes. 7-layer gelatin salad became the ultimate showpiece for 70s entertaining. It was absolutely insane. Each layer required precise timing and temperature control. Home cooks waited for each colored tier to set before adding the next, creating edible stained glass that caught light beautifully on buffet tables. The final result looked like something from a science fiction movie, with jewel-toned layers that wobbled dramatically when you touched the table. The Jell-O marketing team worked overtime promoting these creations. Flavors included raspberry vanilla, 7-Up lime, and spiced cranberry. Companies published recipe books showing families how to create elaborate gelatin sculptures that seemed more like art projects than food. They convinced people this was sophisticated cooking. Here's what made it completely insane. People genuinely believed these wobbly, artificial tasting constructions represented sophisticated cooking. Church potlucks and family reunions featured competitions for the most elaborate gelatin creation. Families invested hours in making desserts that tasted like flavored sugar water. They took this stuff seriously. The technique required patience and planning that made 7-layer gelatin perfect for special occasions when hosts wanted to showcase their culinary dedication. Women spent entire afternoons carefully timing each layer, treating gelatin preparation like serious cooking. They acted like they were creating fine art, but the psychology was even more ridiculous. These translucent, wobbling towers somehow made families feel elegant and modern. The space-age appearance convinced people they were experiencing futuristic cuisine that represented advanced food technology. They thought this was the future of food. Kitchen stores sold specialized gelatin molds, layer guides, and recipe collections. Families owned multiple gelatin molds for different occasions, treating them like serious cooking equipment rather than novelty items. The investment was crazy. What's truly shocking is how seriously people took this artificial food product. Gelatin became the foundation for elaborate entertaining, with hosts planning entire parties around colorful, wobbling towers of flavored sugar. This trend proved that presentation could completely override taste and nutrition. Families willingly spent hours creating inedible-looking food because it seemed modern and sophisticated. Cheese ball with ham and pineapple? Here's a party food so ridiculous it's actually genius. 70s families became obsessed with rolling massive amounts of cheese into balls and coating them with nuts. Cheese balls were the ultimate conversation starter at every single party. The combination of cream cheese, sharp cheddar, diced ham, and crushed pineapple created sweet and savory appetizers that defined 70s entertaining. Hosts would shape these mixtures into balls or logs, then roll them in chopped pecans, parsley, or paprika for dramatic color contrast. But here's what made it completely insane. People treated cheese balls like serious culinary accomplishments. Recipe collections featured dozens of variations: cheese balls with olives, cheese balls with bacon, cheese balls with different nuts. Families owned special cheese ball recipes passed down through generations. The presentation was everything. Hosts would place these cheese-covered spheres on special serving platters, surround them with crackers, and act like they'd created sophisticated European appetizers. The visual impact was enormous. Guests couldn't ignore a massive ball of cheese sitting in the middle of the table. The psychology was brilliant. Cheese balls were simple to make but looked impressive and restaurant-worthy. The make-ahead convenience allowed hosts to enjoy their own parties while still providing memorable appetizers that guests talked about for weeks. What's truly shocking is how this became the standard for sophisticated entertaining. Every party required at least one cheese ball, and hosts competed to create the most elaborate versions. Some families made multiple cheese balls with different flavors for larger gatherings. The social aspect was equally ridiculous. Guests would gather around the cheese ball, spreading it on crackers while discussing the recipe and technique. These simple mixtures of dairy products became conversation pieces that brought people together. This trend proved that Americans would embrace any food that seemed elegant and impressive, even if it was just cheese rolled into a sphere and covered with nuts. The cheese ball became a symbol of 70s hospitality and sophisticated home entertaining. Beef stroganoff from a packet. Get ready for international cuisine made easy. 70s families convinced themselves they were cooking authentic Russian food by mixing powder packets with ground beef. Beef stroganoff from a box promised exotic European flavors without any actual cooking skills. It was completely fake, but nobody cared. The marketing was brilliant. Companies told families they could enjoy sophisticated Russian cuisine using just ground beef, water, and a packet of artificial flavoring. The stroganoff variety promised rich, creamy sauce with hints of paprika and garlic that transformed ordinary hamburger into something that sounded worldly. They bought it completely. Here's what made it completely ridiculous. Real beef stroganoff uses expensive beef tenderloin, fresh mushrooms, and genuine sour cream. The packet version used ground beef and powdered sour cream that bore no resemblance to authentic Russian cooking. But families didn't care. They felt sophisticated serving international cuisine. They had no idea. The convenience factor was enormous. Parents could provide what seemed like restaurant-quality ethnic food in 15 minutes, using ingredients from their pantry. Kids loved the creamy, tangy sauce, while adults felt cultured serving dishes with foreign names. Everyone was happy with this complete lie. The packets contained artificial flavors, preservatives, and enough sodium to preserve meat for decades. But 70s families saw this as advanced food technology that made gourmet cooking accessible to ordinary people. The powder somehow convinced millions of Americans they were experiencing authentic European cuisine. It was mass delusion. What's truly shocking is how this completely replaced traditional cooking. Instead of learning actual techniques or using fresh ingredients, families embraced artificial flavoring packets as legitimate cooking. The stroganoff sauce, made entirely from chemicals and preservatives, satisfied people who'd never tasted real Russian food. Kitchen pantries filled with packet mixes for every possible international dish. Families owned packets for Chinese, Mexican, Italian, and Russian cuisine, believing they were experiencing world food culture through powdered artificial flavors. They thought they were so worldly. This trend proved that convenience could completely override authenticity. Americans would rather have easy, fake international food than learn actual cooking techniques or use genuine ingredients from other cultures. Carrot cake with cream cheese frosting. Here's the dessert that convinced 70s families they could eat cake and vegetables at the same time. Carrot cake became the ultimate guilt-free indulgence because it contained actual vegetables. Parents genuinely believed they were serving healthy dessert. They were completely delusional, but it made them feel better. The dense, moist cake, studded with shredded carrots, walnuts, and warm spices like cinnamon and nutmeg, felt wholesome and virtuous. Families justified serving cake for dessert because it contained vegetables, reflecting the era's growing awareness of nutrition and natural ingredients. They convinced themselves this was health food, but here's what made it completely ridiculous. These cakes contained more sugar, butter, and cream cheese frosting than actual carrots. The tiny amount of vegetable content got completely overwhelmed by massive amounts of sugar and fat. But somehow, families convinced themselves this represented healthy eating. The mental gymnastics were incredible. The thick layer of cream cheese frosting provided the perfect tangy contrast to the cake's sweetness. The rustic appearance and homemade taste made carrot cake feel like something grandmothers had been baking for generations. Even though its popularity was distinctly modern, it seemed traditional but wasn't. The psychology was brilliant. Parents could serve dessert to their children while claiming it contained vegetables. Kids got sweet cake, adults felt virtuous about the carrots, and everyone was happy with this completely artificial compromise. It was the perfect 70s solution. What's truly shocking is how successfully this cake combined health consciousness with indulgence. 70s families were beginning to worry about nutrition, but weren't ready to give up rich desserts. Carrot cake provided the perfect solution. Vegetables hidden in sugar. It was genius marketing. The trend exploded at church potlucks and family reunions where hosts wanted to provide something that seemed both special and wholesome. The golden orange cake with white frosting created beautiful presentations that looked impressive and homemade. Everyone felt good about eating it. This dessert proved that Americans would embrace any food that seemed healthy, even if it was basically sugar and butter with tiny amounts of vegetables mixed in. Carrot cake became the ultimate symbol of 70s compromise between health and indulgence. Swedish meatballs in grape jelly. Prepare yourself for the most shocking sauce combination in culinary history. 70s, families discovered that grape jelly mixed with chili sauce created the perfect glaze for meatballs, and they served this proudly at dinner parties. Yes, you heard that right. Grape jelly. The same stuff kids put on peanut butter sandwiches. The secret ingredient that shocked guests was grape jelly, children's sandwich filling, mixed with tomato-based chili sauce. This combination sounds absolutely insane, but it actually balanced the savory beef and spices while creating an appealing shiny coating that made everything look restaurant-worthy. People couldn't believe it worked. Here's what made it completely ridiculous. Families who served hamburger helper for weeknight dinners suddenly felt sophisticated offering Swedish cuisine at parties. These meatballs disappeared faster than hosts could refill the chafing dishes, proving that weird flavor combinations sometimes work perfectly. Everyone wanted the recipe. The grape jelly actually served a scientific purpose. The natural fruit sugars balanced the acidity of the chili sauce, while the pectin created a glossy coating that clung to each meatball. But nobody understood the food science. They just knew it tasted amazing and looked impressive. The psychology was brilliant. Hosts could serve something that sounded international and sophisticated using ingredients from their kitchen pantry. Swedish meatballs felt worldly and elegant, even though they were basically hamburger balls in grape jelly. The foreign name made everything seem sophisticated. Party guests would ask for the recipe, shocked to discover that the delicious glaze contained children's sandwich filling. The combination seemed so wrong that it somehow became right, creating conversation conversation pieces that people talked about for years. It became legendary. What's truly shocking is how this represented the experimental spirit of 70s cooking. Traditional flavor rules got thrown out in favor of bold, unexpected combinations that somehow worked perfectly together. Families embraced culinary adventure, even if it meant mixing candy with dinner. This trend proved that Americans were willing to try anything, no matter how bizarre it sounded. Swedish meatballs in grape jelly became the ultimate symbol of 70s cooking creativity and willingness to experiment with impossible flavor combinations. American goulash. Get ready for cultural appropriation at its finest. 70s families took authentic Hungarian cuisine and turned it into ground beef with macaroni, then proudly called it goulash. This Americanized version bore absolutely no resemblance to real Hungarian cooking. It was basically an insult to an entire culture. Real Hungarian goulash is a hearty stew of beef and vegetables with paprika and other spices, slow cooked for hours until the meat becomes tender. The American version simply mixed ground beef, elbow macaroni, kidney beans, and tomato juice in one pot, and somehow convinced families they were eating authentic European cuisine. The audacity was incredible. Here's what made it completely insane. Ground beef dominated every 70s dinner. It seemed like every meal involved stretching 1 pound of hamburger into a family dinner using whatever carbohydrates were available. Macaroni, rice, potatoes, anything that could absorb flavor and fill stomachs. Hamburger was the solution to everything. The one-pot preparation meant fewer dishes to wash, while the hearty combination of pasta, meat, and beans provided the protein and carbohydrates that growing families needed. The dish represented practical American cooking, taking the essence of an ethnic recipe and completely destroying it with available ingredients and busy schedules. But the psychology was even more ridiculous. Families genuinely believed they were experiencing Hungarian culture through this completely artificial adaptation. The foreign name made ordinary hamburger and pasta seem exotic and sophisticated. They thought they were so worldly. Ground cumin, chili powder, and canned Mexican diced tomatoes somehow made this Hungarian cuisine, proving that 70s families had no understanding of actual ethnic cooking. They just mixed whatever spices seemed foreign and called the result international food. Geography meant nothing. What's truly shocking is how this became standard family cooking. American goulash appeared on dinner tables across the country, with families convinced they were serving traditional European cuisine. The complete departure from authentic ingredients and techniques didn't matter. The name was enough. This trend proved that Americans would appropriate any international dish and adapt it beyond recognition, then act like they were experiencing authentic ethnic cuisine. It was cultural theft disguised as convenience cooking.